that okay for sound?
Yeah.
Yes. Playing or thunder and swing. You can probably hear.
There we are. It's called the Snow Daughter, or Little Daughter of the Snow. There was an old couple who lived alone in their hut in a village in the heart of the Russian forest. It was worst in the snowy winter because then the cold and the dark kept the children from playing in the forest, and instead they whooped and yelled as they ran up and down the village street, sliding on the ice, chucking snowballs. And the whoops and yells of laughter cut into the old people's hearts because they ate with the knowledge that they never had any children of their own. One day, the old woman called her husband to the window. "Come and see," she said. "They've built a snow witch, and they're dancing around it, and they're chanting, and they're yelling abuse at her, they're taunting her, as if she's a real person, as if the figures come to life. Maybe if we built a snow daughter, we could talk to her as if she were alive." And the old man looked at his wife's eyes, and he agreed. So the next morning they got to work in the backyard, out of sight of everybody else behind their hut. They shaped and stroked those limbs into shape, just as if they were caressing a real child. And maybe something saw the love that they put into this, because when she was finished and she stood before them, she was perfect. She was perfect in every detail, way above the skill that their hands could ever have managed. And they looked at her, the daughter that they could never have. Tears in their eyes. And the old woman bent over her and said, "Oh, my lovely child, won't you just talk to us, little snow daughter?" And as her tears dropped onto the snow, the cheeks became tinged with colour. And the hair was the blackest of black, and the lips parted and laughed, and she skipped away. And as she skipped and whirled round the yard, dancing with the snowflakes, they could hear her singing. And the words were that she would stay. She would stay and dance and play night and day, as long as she knew that they loved her best of all. And of course they did. When they offered to fold her in their arms, this wonderful child, she skipped and laughed and ran away. But she let them put on her a coat and a hat and mittens and fur boots, just like the other children in the street. And then she danced around the yard again. When they invited her into the hut, she came just as far as the doorway. But she wouldn't go any further, too hot, and she certainly wouldn't eat their food, too hot, she said. And when the old woman invited her to come back in because it was now bedtime, she just skipped and laughed and said again, "Too hot, dance and play night and day, as long as I know you love me best of all." Now, it has to be said that old men tend to get up quite a few times in the night. But the old man, he got up more than even usual, just to be able to look out of the window and see the little figure whirling round in the moonlight and the stars. Next morning, when the other children went to play on the street, their snow daughter was out there with them. Oh, and now they ached with pride. And the children, well, it didn't take them long worrying where she came from. When they found that she laughed louder than they did, she could run faster, she could slide further on the ice, she could throw snowballs faster and better. Then, after a while, they wondered how they'd played without her. They built a snow Baba Yaga, a witch, and she laughed more than any of them. She rolled on the floor laughing when they pelted it with snowballs and it fell to bits. And it went on like this, day after day, until there came a day when the air smelt different. And a horse drawing a sledge of lumber went down the street, and rather than just skating across the ice, it left a brown, muddy track behind it. Now, the little daughter of the snow led the children into the edge of the forest where it was still snowy and cold, and they played there. And each day as spring went on, they went just a bit further and a bit further until it was cold enough and snowy enough. There came a day when one of the children said, "We want to go and play in the sunshine." And another said, "Yeah, and if we go any further into the forest, we're going to get lost. We shan't find the way back to the village." Well, the snow daughter, she laughed and she skipped a bit further on, but they turned and they'd gone back. She danced a bit more for the sake of it. And then she climbed a tree because she realized that she was lost, but all she could see was more trees. After a while, the tree began shaking. She looked down and there was a huge bear with his feet against the trunk. "Why do you cry, little daughter of the snow?" "Because I've lost my way home and I've lost my friends and I'm lonely," she said. "I'll take you home." "Bear, you're much bigger than me, and I don't know that I trust you not to eat me on the way." A little while later, there was a great grey wolf who loped up. "Why do you cry, little daughter of the snow?" "Because I've lost my way to the village and I've lost my friends and I'm lonely," she said. "I'll take you home." "Well, wolf, you have very big teeth, and I don't know that I trust you not to eat me." Then a fox came. "Little daughter of the snow, why do you cry?" And when he found out why and he offered to take her home, she looked at the size of him and said, "I think I trust you not to eat me, fox. I'll come with you, thank you." Now back in the hut, the old people were weeping for the loss of that daughter they had so longed for, when all of a sudden the dogs set up a great big din because they smelt fox. The old man went out into the yard to see if the hens were safe. When he heard the snow daughter's voice calling, "The kind fox has brought me home. Tie up the dogs and then open the gate so we can come into the yard." When that was done, she was so glad to be back that she actually allowed the old people to fold her in their arms. And then she said, "Wasn't that kind of the fox to bring me back?" "Oh, yes, of course," said the old man between his tears of joy. "Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. How can we ever repay you?" And the fox grinned and said, "Well, I'm always hungry." "Oh, yes," said the older man. "Yes, I can find a crust of a loaf, I'm sure." "I was thinking," said the fox, "that a daughter was worth a bit more than the crust of a loaf." "Yes, of course," said the old man. "And I know that you have hens," said the fox. "Yes, of course," said the old man. And the old woman quickly said, "You go into the hut, dear, out of the wind. We'll make sure that Mr. Fox gets at least a hen for his trouble." Just for once, the little daughter of the snow was quite glad to go into the welcoming atmosphere of the hut. She stayed at the furthest end away from the fire. As they were going towards the hen coop, the old woman said to the old man, "Well, our daughter is now safe. We have her. She's inside the hut. And a hen is not to be sneezed at. I'll tell you what we'll do." And they came back towards the fox with not just one, but two wriggling, bulging sacks. And the fox's ears were full of the sound of angry, cackling hen. "Here you are, Mr. Fox," said the old woman. And she opened her sack, and feathers and indignant hen exploded out of it. And here you are, said the old man at the same moment, opening his sack, and their biggest and most ferocious dog shot out straight for the fox's throat. The fox leapt over the fence in one bound. When they caught the hen and put her back in the hen coop, they were still laughing when they came back into the hut. Didn't know a fox could jump that high, said the old man. And then they stopped because they saw the heap of hats, mittens, coats, boots, in the middle of a pile of melting ice and snow. And there was the snow daughter's voice echoing from somewhere. Blood in your veins, but in mine just water. But you valued a hen more than your daughter. And that was the last they ever saw or heard of her. But the children, oh, they said each winter that they heard her laughing in the forest, in the snow. And that is the snow daughter. Thank you.